Hey guys, it's Dr. Ben back for part 3 of our stress series. So in the first couple parts, we talked about the how and the why of stress, how it occurs, why it occurs, what happens when it occurs in our body. Just a quick review on that. So when we look at our adaptation to stress, anytime we encounter a stressor, we have a process that goes on called the HPA axis, that hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis that helps our body deal with stress. So as soon as we encounter a stress or we perceive the stress, our brain kicks in that axis. Our hypothalamus tells our pituitary to release a hormone that goes down to our adrenal glands to release our stress hormones to then deal with that stress. Stress is stress is stress is stress. It doesn't matter what the stressor is, mental, emotional, physical, physiological, chemical, whatever it is. We do pretty much the exact same thing for every stress response. So now that we've, in the last couple of videos kind of reviewed all that and then did a quick review there, what we need to talk about is what we can do to handle our stress better. At the end of the day, you can't really do a lot as far as taking the stress away necessarily, or at least all the stress. I mean, you can reduce stress in your life, absolutely, but you can't reduce all stress and you can't eliminate all stress. Stress is going to happen. So what we need to do is talk about how to adapt to stress better. So there are a few things we can do. One of the most effective ways is looking at fuel source first and foremost. So we got to look at diet. With our diet, as we talked about in the previous videos, if we're eating a lot of highly processed, high sugar foods, our blood sugar will skip around up and down, whether it's with insulin resistance or insulin insensitivity, or even on the opposite side with hypoglycemia, low blood sugar. If our blood sugar doesn't stay stable, it's going to create stress in our body. So what we need to focus on, instead of all of the comfort foods that most people go after when they're stressed, is eating a diet, high in whole unprocessed foods. So, fruits and vegetables, lean proteins, healthy fats. The higher protein intake we can get, the better. And the higher healthy fat intake we can get, the better. Of course, don't eliminate carbs necessarily. Carbs are not the devil inherently. Protein is not the devil. Fat is not the devil. Fiber is not the devil. None of that is the devil. If it's eaten in the correct amounts, most people tolerate all of them pretty well. So you don't necessarily have to go on a ketogenic diet or go on a low-fat diet or go on a, high carbohydrate diet or whatever it is. But just make sure you're getting in enough of those carbs, fats, and proteins in healthy versions for your body, for your needs. Also, on that side of things, when we look at the impact of food on our nervous system, because ultimately that's what stress really deals with, is how well our nervous system adapts to all of those stressors. We have to look at the impact of what we eat on our gut microbiome. All of those bacteria and viruses and parasites and fungi that make up the microbiota that lines our gastrointestinal tract. And look, that stuff's really important for a lot of different reasons. Research is really catching up with the fact that controls a lot of our basic processes, whether it is helping us to just basically absorb nutrients, to break down our foods and absorb nutrients out of it, to convert hormones to an active form or to build hormones. But also, it has a huge role in our brain function. So there's a lot of research that has come out lately showing that certain neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's may actually originate in the gut. And like we have that HPA axis that controls our stress, you also have what's called the gut-brain axis, or the brain-gut axis, that connects our brain and our gastrointestinal tract. And while stimulation goes both ways, we primarily think of our brain activating our gastrointestinal tract. What they're finding in research now is it can go the opposite way in a detrimental effect. If we have a lot of inflammation from a lot of processed foods and things like that added into our diet, we can actually get to the point where we're pushing that inflammation back up those peripheral nerves that connect the two. And then you can create a scenario where you create inflammation in the nervous system, which again is stress. So we want to try to mitigate that as much as possible. Next thing we need to look at is exercise. So exercise is important. Movement is always important. If you want, again, a healthier brain, you got to move. If you want a healthier body, you got to move. If we want to adapt to stress properly, we got to move. But when we look at the type of exercise, it does make a difference. So again, overtraining can be a big stressor. We don't need to go out and do things like CrossFit necessarily. We don't need to be power lifters necessarily or long distance runners necessarily to get the positive stress reducing effects of exercise. So when we're looking at the stress reduction side of exercise, we want to think more light to moderate exercise. So, some light walking or jogging is a good idea. Cycling, yoga, those type of things tend to be easier on our bodies and still give us the requisite amount of musculoskeletal stimulation that'll help keep our brain and our nervous system healthy, which is ultimately what we're going for. And always, if you can, if weather allows, do it outside, because being out in the fresh air has shown to have positive stress reduction effects. So from there, we also want to talk about sleep. So if you're eating great and you're exercising, but you're not getting enough sleep, doesn't really matter. Sleep is when we do a lot of our healing. Sleep is when our brain and our nervous system kind of clears itself out. And that circadian rhythm that we talked about last time, where our cortisol, our stress hormone, should be highest in the morning and then slowly lower until its lowest point around the evening time, somewhere between like 8 and midnight. And that's really important. So getting a requisite amount of sleep helps our body recover. It also keeps that circadian rhythm in line. If you have a night job, that will affect it. That actually throws that balance out. Staying up all night, binge watching, something on Hulu or Netflix or Disney Plus or whatever it is not a good idea. Only getting, 3, 4, 5 hours of sleep is not a good idea. We want to try to strive for about 7, 8 hours of sleep is the happy spot for most people. Some people need a little more, some people need a little less, but 7 to 8 hours is a good average. The other thing there is we need to look at the effects of our sleep hygiene or sleep quality itself. If you stay up till 9 or 10, 11 o'clock and then go to bed, but for the hour or two before you go to sleep, you're on your computer, you're on your phone, you're watching a TV show or movie, that noxious blue light that comes from the screen can actually create a stress response in our body. It's the same as, so when we get that cortisol release in the mornings, the way that happens is light actually hits our eye and then stimulates our brain to produce cortisol to wake us up. The same thing happens if you're staring at a computer screen all night. I know a lot of people have done that. They'll sit up and watch a really bright screen and they can't go to sleep. It's because it's creating stress on our nervous system. It's telling us that we need to be awake. So, doing things to eliminate some of that blue light, like turning it off an hour or so before bed, read a book or something, meditate, deep breathe, pray, whatever it is for you, that would be a better idea. Sleeping in cooler temperatures has been shown to also relieve stress on our body and help us sleep better. And again, doing things to help mitigate the effects of stress, like deep breathing, prayer, meditation, helps as well, which is one of the next things we want to talk about. So deep breathing is one of the easiest strategies to help us reduce and cope with stress acutely. When we break down how breathing actually works, the inhalation phase of breathing is more sympathetically driven, which is our fight or flight system. So it's more stress-based. Where exhalation is more parasympathetically driven, which is our rest and digest and recovery system. So what we want to do if we use deep breathing measures therapeutically is set up a ratio of what would be a 1-1-2 breathing technique, where we inhale for the same amount of time that we hold the breath for, and then exhale for twice as long. So what I usually have people do is start out with something simple. Inhale for 2 seconds, hold for 2 seconds, and exhale for 4. So 1-1-2. And then build it like you would an exercise where we do, 8 reps, 10 reps, 12 reps, like that. And do it throughout the day. Obviously, if it's making you hyperventilate, you're probably going to want to back off on how many reps you do, but build yourself into it. And then once, 10 to 12 reps at 2, 2, and 4 there become easy, you add a second to the inhalation and hold, which adds 2 seconds to the exhalation. So you go to 3, 3, 6, and then 4, 4, 8, et cetera, et cetera. The more time we can spend in the exhalation, the more of a parasympathetic drive we get. So that can be a helpful tool to reducing stress acutely. One thing from a I guess a supplemental standpoint that we can talk about, this is a one that I get asked about a lot, is adaptogenic herbs. Those cortisol managers or stress managers or all those things can be very helpful, but they need to be used correctly. So when we look at a few of them, so adaptogens are herbs that help our body handle stress better. They do it in different ways. Like, for example, you have a couple. One's called Schisandra, the other one's called rhodiola, which are herbs that have actually been shown to modulate gene expression in our hypothalamus in order to decrease the amount of that corticotropin releasing factor that's released, which is that hormone that tells our pituitary to release its hormone ACTH to go down and cause cortisol release at the adrenal level. So by taking those 2 herbs, you can actually slow down that HPA axis, slow down that stress response if you have an exaggerated stress response. Ashwagandha, which is another adaptogen that's very popular, has been shown to greatly reduce stress-induced anxiety and improve resistance to stress. So you remember we talked about it's less about the necessarily the amount of stress that's on the body, but more about how we adapt to that stress. So if we can improve adaptation, we want to. Another thing that we can do, and there are other things you can take, but adaptogens are typically one of the most popular. You can also, there's some research showing that certain probiotic strains help to reduce stress, again, because of that the brain-gut axis. And vitamin C does reduce exercise-induced stress and aids in recovery. Fish oils have been shown to reduce inflammation associated with stress. So there are other options, vitamin D, vitamin A, but most people, when they think of stress, they think of the cortisol managers and the adaptogens or adaptogenic herbs. So that's one thing I wanted to make sure that we covered in there. Another thing that can help, so when we look at the psychological perspective of stress, is mindfulness. Are you a glass half empty or glass half full type of person? Are you more pessimistic or optimistic? That plays a huge role in how we deal with stress. Okay. if you're always looking at the negative side of things, you're always going to elicit a stress response with every thought. And you build pathways in your brain that actually will run down those same negative thought pathways over and over and over again. It's called plasticity. We create pathways in our nervous system for pretty much everything, every stimulation, to allow our nervous system to adapt to the stimulation properly and more efficiently. So you get it with negative thoughts, you get it with positive thoughts. That's how things like in psychology, there's a practice or technique called reframing, where you take a stressful situation or a negative situation, and we attach a more positive outlook to it, or reframe it into a more positive outlook instead of the negative, which helps to build those pathways up from a positive standpoint as opposed to a negative standpoint. So it gives us a bit of a measure of control in the chaos, or at least a perception of control in the chaos, which can help reduce that stress response or the exaggerated stress response. And another thing on the psychological side is, don't just isolate yourself. Get out and spend time with friends, family, loved ones. Do something outside. That's one thing that this pandemic has taught us, that isolation can be very, very, very bad for our mental health. And we already knew that, but it just kind of brought it more to the forefront. So if you want to help to adapt to stress or reduce your stress more, get out and do something. It's a very simple thing. Go take a walk outside. Go spend some time with somebody that you enjoy spending time with. But as we look, there's a few things there that we can do to help control our stress better. We can improve our diet. We can improve our exercise and sleep patterns. We can take a few things supplementally that may help. We can work on deep breathing. We can work on mindfulness, and we can work on just having a more positive outlook on life. All those things are easier said than done, but they do help. If you are struggling with any of this, reach out to your healthcare practitioners that are more familiar with these things, that can help you to reduce stress. Because as we talked about, stress has been associated with a lot of different, very common issues that people go and see their healthcare practitioners for. A lot of them are trained in how to help you, so let them. All right, guys, that's pretty much a wrap for this series. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us on social media or over the phone. But it was a pleasure going through all this stuff with you guys, and I can't wait for the next one.